So yeah, I think we'll start off with opening statements from Robin and Zvi, about 10 minutes each. And then I think Ollie and Jacob will be in chat and might take questions throughout, but we'll mostly run forwards with the debate for at least another hour. And then we'll have a bunch of Q&A stuff definitely after that. So I think that's everything. In that case, I'm looking forward to hearing Robin's statement on checkmate on Blackmail. Robin?
Hello, everyone. I broke my arm a week and a half ago, so I'm a little slow. So that if there's any way in which I seem a little slow compared to usual, that's probably it. But I can't type very well, but I can talk, so this is great. Let's talk. The topic really is gossip and regulation of gossip. Blackmail is one of the many ways we regulate gossip. So gossip, of course, is just talking about things, including about each other. And we generally think of gossip as good in the sense that humans evolved with language and with norms, and we enforce norms through gossip. At least that's been a very long-standing way we enforce norms. So one of the main functions of gossip about other people is so that we can talk about whether they broke norms and whether we want to disapprove of them and use reputation and shaming to change people's incentives regarding the things they do. That's gossip. So generally in our society, we allow gossip. We limit gossip and regulate it in some ways. Sometimes we require gossip in the sense of, say, you're supposed to report a crime if you see it. Other times we ban gossip. For example, we say you're not allowed to post nude pictures of someone or their bank passwords. There's various kinds of censorship. So, that's an issue. We ban false gossip in many ways. We ban gossip that's not true. We have, slander, libel, defamation. So it makes sense in general to not allow all gossip or even require gossip, but we're talking about something that goes well beyond that. So just always keep in mind, it's always going to be an option to ban or require gossip as the solution to any particular problem. As a context, there's a bunch of other things in the world where we are shy about money. So we say allow people to choose things like sex or kids, but we don't allow people to directly buy and sell them. So we have laws against prostitution, but we still say you can choose to have sex or not have sex. You can choose to adopt a kid or put a kid up for adoption, but you're still not supposed to have money involved there. We also have sort of related rules against money in voting or money in grades. But in most of these contexts, we allow sort of indirect forms of gift exchange. So you can trade money for sex only if you do it indirectly over time, but not directly. And that's a part of the context here, because the laws against blackmail are mainly laws against money and gossip. We also allow people with respect to gossip to have money involved with third parties. So a newspaper can pay you to tell your story to them, and we allow money and gossip to be related in that way. Furthermore, we have what's called a non-disclosure agreement, which are very common. And this is where someone offers to pay you to keep quiet about something. You agree not to disclose, and then there's a contract, and somewhere, of course, in the contract, they're compensating you in some other way. Otherwise, why would you sign it? And you agree to not disclose something, and that's legal. We don't allow explicitly the other party to make the same offer for the same deal. So the key thing that I think is suspicious and hard to justify isn't having regulation about gossip for or against. It isn't necessarily even banning money deals with respect to gossip. The extreme puzzle is why allow people to make a deal where they get paid not to say something only if the person with the money makes the offer, but not if the other side makes the offer. And of course, once you realize that this is the rules, you can get around it pretty easily. And so it's actually relatively straightforward to indirectly suggest that you might be open to such a deal, but not explicitly offer the deal. And then the other side can offer the deal, and then it's all legal. So for example, typically when you inform someone that you're going to pursue divorce proceedings, implicitly there is the threat, well, we've got information on you, and if you go ahead if you let us go ahead, we're going to air all these embarrassing things in court. So if you don't want that stuff embarrassing stuff in court, then you better settle with us on this divorce agreement. Otherwise, we're going to tell. So that's basically the threat of blackmail, but it's allowed because it's indirect enough. And again, there are many other ways of being indirect enough that would allow you to suggest that you might make a deal without directly offering the deal, and those are all legal. So the illegal thing is the explicit making the suggestion that we make a deal where I, for example, get money and I keep your secret. I get money from you. So the key idea is when you have intelligent people who understand this context, and you can use lawyers as intermediaries, you can do whatever you wanted to do anyway. The law mainly just makes you use a lawyer and makes you go through hoops in terms of how you make the suggestion. Sometimes people use phrasing here in terms of harm. They say, well, the problem is most gossip isn't harmful, but this gossip is harmful. And this deal is harmful. And so the problem here with gossip is that it's harmful. But of course, harmful depends on the reference point for what would have happened without the deal. So if you have the reference point that without this deal, I wouldn't have said anything, and then I come in and say, hey, I'm going to say something unless you make the deal, then I seem to be harming you. But if I was going to say it anyway, but I'm just letting you pay me not to say it, well, now relative to that reference, I'm helping you. I'm making you better off relative to the reference. So I think you have to be careful with how you phrase talking about harm, because it depends on the reference. So also I want to note that most people do seem like, I did some polls 3-to-1 against blackmail being legal, but that's with respect to sort of an extreme version of cash. When I asked for other sorts of situations whether blackmail would be okay, people seem to be quite in favor of it. So for example, say I have a secret that I don't want you to tell, and so I blackmail you by saying, well, if you tell my secret, I'll tell your secret. That's blackmail, but most people think that's great. And 12-to-1 in favor of that. Also, if you think somebody's being unfair to you, people, at least 3-to-2 said, well, yes, it's okay to threaten to reveal a secret about theirs to get them to be more fair to you. And also 1-to-1 to get them to treat, if you have a crisis where your kid needs medical care, if you're trying to get someone to take care of him, to help you, then threatening to reveal a secret is just fine there. So people are not that consistent about which kind of situations they think blackmail is okay in. The one extreme situation of cash, they seem to disapprove, but we already see that people disapprove of cash in many ways. And so I got to frame this as saying, this is more about sort of feeling awkward about letting cash be directly associated with things than it is about the actual outcomes. Just like, again, people are okay with indirect payments for sex as long as it's not explicit prostitution. A nice date and dinner, etc., would be okay in many people's minds as long as it's not explicit agreement. And similarly with blackmail, they don't want the explicit deal for money, but they do seem to find it okay to get other forms of compensation and to, as long as the other party makes the offer. So people are generally okay, again, with blackmail if it's not directly money compensation, if it's not an explicit agreement, or if even the person who has the secret they want kept is the one who makes the offer rather than the person who might reveal it.
There's 2 minutes left there.
Well, I'm just about done. So, I have more stories if we want to get into sort of trying to explain why people are averse to blackmail, but that would be my first highest level cut. And so my argument basically is that people have various aversions to explicitly letting money be associated with this, and this is an example of that, and plausibly to be explained in the same way you explain the others. And it's not that we don't actually want the outcomes associated with this sort of thing, we just don't want the appearance of certain kind of signals that would send if you explicitly allowed it. And your turn, Zvi.
Cool, cheers, thanks a lot, Robin. Zvi, do you want to give your opening statement? You are muted, and it would be great if you were not muted for your opening statement.
Yes. Okay. So I think that Robin addressed some of the reasons that I strongly believe that blackmail should be illegal / strongly discouraged as much as possible, but not others. And similarly, I think he has hit upon some of the reasons why other people generally dislike it, but not central ones. One particular thing is that the idea of money versus not money. I definitely feel like the most dangerous situations regarding blackmail are ones where what you want is not money, where what you want is to essentially corrupt another person and to appropriate their power and to get them to do things they would not otherwise do. For example, when you are asking for better treatment in medical care, people approved of that because it's seen as securing medical care for your family. But what that actually is you are redirecting resources that are under the control of this person from someone else to you by threatening this person, which takes resources away from anybody who's not willing to so threaten or lacks those resources. In general, people without money, which is most of us who are not that vulnerable to money blackmail, are highly vulnerable to other forms of blackmail. And many people who have access to a lot of power can be convinced to use that power in other ways. If you can get blackmail on a judge, if you can get blackmail on a senator, you can get blackmail on a journalist, you can get blackmail on any number of people, you can get very valuable resources out of them. I think talking about it as gossip is one way of putting it, but I think the distinction between gossip motivated by harming a particular person, causing harm, and gossip motivated by the desire to seem useful or the desire to spread information people need is very large. I think there should be a presumption that sharing information because people would find it useful, because you feel people need to know, is probably a positive effect. And we should, if the information is true, probably favor it. And if your reason to select the information to be shared and the way in which you share it are designed to increase your leverage to maximize harm to the person, I believe we should assume that the information is actually net harmful and will do damage. Robin brought up the issue of divorce. I think that most of us can agree that when all of a couple's dirty laundry is aired in divorce court, this is not a net benefit to society of airing useful gossip. This is mostly destructive and leaves everybody destroyed and miserable. It's not just that the lawyers end up with the money, it's that everybody hates everybody else. The kids end up traumatized and estranged. It's a very bad scene, and the fact that we favor essentially whoever is willing to be more mad and willing to be more destructive in a divorce settlement, and this hangs over every marriage in America, seems like a very, very bad thing. And I think that if we could arrange for divorce courts to be more private, that would actually be a big win if we could reduce gossip in that particular situation, as a concrete example that he brought up. There's also the question of banning things directly versus banning things indirectly. So prostitution is an interesting case because I think both Robin and I would think that prostitution should be legal. But in this situation in which we thought that, prostitution, the exchange of money for sexual favors was a bad thing to some extent and should be against norms. Yes, you can get around it, obviously. Plenty of people have nice dinners and then go home together all the time and would not have gone home together if the nice dinner had not been purchased and an exchange was made. But there is definitely a big distinction in terms of the lived experience of everybody involved and in terms of the degree to which the exchange depends on money specifically is pretty big. Blackmail is even more so. If you get to go to somebody directly and threaten them explicitly that unless you pay X, I will do Y, the exchange becomes much more explicit, much more direct, allows the extraction of much more money, makes it much more likely that information will be revealed that if you are not paid, because it greatly increases the onerous on you to sort of hold up your end of the deal, your reputation in that situation, and other similar things. And also just, like Scott Alexander said, beware trivial inconveniences, and these are far from trivial inconveniences. Requiring you to go through lawyers, requiring you to make indirect suggestions, requiring you to have a legal venue in which to pursue your suggestion at all, in which to request the payment. All of these things highly discourage the activity. Also, the fact that the activity is considered illegal and against norms itself makes it very hard to punish norm violations, especially relatively small ones, by going through this process, because the very act of asking for blackmail causes you to be the one who looks worse when things are revealed rather than them. One of Robin's articles, for example, brought up the David Letterman situation. There's also the Jeff Bezos situation with the National Enquirer. People who come clean in the face of a blackmailer will often essentially be forgiven for the thing in which they were actually caught, because the blackmailer needs to look even worse and not be rewarded for his behavior. And I think that's a very natural instinct, and that pertains to dynamics. If the blackmailer was seen as having done nothing wrong, then this person would be in a very difficult spot. So those are the basic things given with that. And in particular, I think that in a world in which we had to fear blackmail, this would act as a tax on activities and situations and people who were vulnerable to blackmail and increased vulnerability to blackmail. It would reward those willing to engage in blackmail, able to engage in blackmail. And I believe that this shift in resources would favor the powerful. It would favor people which we would not want to have power and resources, and it would be incredibly stressful for our lives. I think it would be a very bad thing. I have, in blackmail, I think basically we want to be able to go about our lives without living in fear, without fear of destructive activity. And I think that, as I got into in my posts, there's way too many different reasons why I believe this to get into in an opening statement, but that if we allowed blackmail on a wide scale, as is effectively happening in a lot of places, that was cheaper, more effective, more accepted, that people's engaging in blackmail would get more ubiquitous and be more and more the concentration of power, and that society would become increasingly corrupted and distorted in ways that I do not think Robin believes.
You're welcome to take another 3 minutes, or you're welcome to start dialoguing at that point.
Okay, so is there anything he said that I haven't addressed? So yeah, the issue of bribery. So I think it's important to note that often a person will have influence over a decision, influence over resources, influence over people's perceptions and opinions, that they cannot easily turn into money, that they cannot easily capitalize on. And also often have the ability to do things that they would not do for money if they were not under duress, or that they would not do for an amount of money people would be willing to pay, but which they could be blackmailed in order to do. So if you are a spy, if you are engaged in like a propaganda campaign, if you are a criminal trying to increase your area of influence, if you are a policeman trying to figure out a crime, although that one we allow because it is in fact the nature of the police, then we can get you to do things despite the fact that we would not be willing to pay you the amount of money you would require to do it, which implies that you doing this thing is highly inefficient. A person who is blackmailed into sex, into sharing pornographic pictures, for example, is clearly doing something they didn't want to do and that you weren't willing to pay for otherwise because you never go around paying people for such things. And therefore, it's clearly highly inefficient. Another last note is, if we have a duty to gossip in the nature of crime, we have to report crime. Then blackmailing somebody in order to not report crime is specifically saying that in exchange for money, you will commit a crime. And it seems very natural that this should be illegal. In fact, it'd be strange if this were not illegal. It's not even clear that and it makes sense for this to be more illegal. And in general, the fact that you can threaten to do harm and thereby extract resources means that we reward people for gaining the ability to do harm. And this seems like exactly the opposite of what we want to do. I want to see people rewarded for the ability to help people, to make life better for others. And I want to see them engage in free trade and exchange for that basis. I do not want to see people strive to get leverage in which to hold up over people all the time. I think that would be a bad world to live in. And I think we live in much more of that world now than we would like. And I'd like to see the laws against this type of blackmail strengthened.
Oh, cheers, Zvi. There was quite a lot there, and I imagine Robin could immediately jump in and engage with a number of them. If Robin wants to pick a thing, I would be somewhat interested in hearing Robin's response just to one of the last things there, which sounded like you thought it was a good thing that people can't be paid for lots of things. I was a bit confused by that. I'm curious, Robin, who's currently on mute, had opinions on that.
We've got a lot of different topics here, so I fear that if we just pick random things, we won't pick the most important things. So I want to try to make sure we stay near the most important topics first. But we have lots of time. We can go lots of directions. I guess to me, the most important central point here is just whether you think the consequences of blackmail are bad. I mean, so if you say that it's a harmful thing, why should we allow the harmful thing? I mean, that's almost like answering the question. The question is it on net a harmful thing? That is the key question here. So the key issue is, norm enforcement. So in general, human societies, for a very long time have used gossip as one of the main mechanisms of norm enforcement. And I want to argue that that's on average typically good. It's good that people gossip and enforce norms. And so the mechanism is that if you do something that violates a norm, you are at risk that if somebody sees it, they may gossip about it and tell other people. And then those other people will disapprove of you. And then you will lose out socially, even if you gained in other ways from the thing you did. And that's the thing discouraging you from doing these things that violate norms. So the key idea here is if you threaten to gossip in exchange for something else that they don't want to do, then from their point of view, that's another way of discouraging whatever it is they're doing, they were thinking of doing. And so even if the information doesn't get out, the same function can be performed by discouraging people from doing the things that they would otherwise have done through the threat of gossip instead of the actual gossip. And in fact, that could be a stronger incentive, because the person who might gossip about you, they might well not do it if they feared your retaliation from you or something, but they might be more willing to do it if they hope to get paid. And so it seems like allowing blackmail turns up the dial a bit, not enormously, on the discouragement that you face by the potential that people will gossip about what you do. So in particular, divorce, I mean, obviously how people treat each other in marriage is a big deal, actually, and in perception. And if someone has been mistreating their spouse, that is the sort of thing that if gossip made about it would make them look bad, should make them look bad. People should be afraid of being made to look bad by gossip about how they mistreated their spouse. That's sort of really core to the function of gossip for a long time. That seems to be a core function. So I don't grant the point that we'd be better off if people couldn't gossip about how they were mistreated in their marriages. You know, maybe it shouldn't be in all possible forms or forums or something, but that's a core function. So, I mean, I have many other points to make, but I guess it seemed to me the most important thing here is to talk about just whether or not it's good or bad. The other point I was thinking of bringing up, and I'll just lay it out there, which is just, look, obviously, I think the powerful people are the people most likely to be targeted for blackmail. That is, they have money and or they have some influence that you might try to get from them. And they are more more vulnerable to people disliking them and disapproving them and getting out of power because of people disapproving of them. And so, in fact, you know, banning blackmail is a way of protecting the powerful. As I can't see any other way of saying that the powerful people they're the ones who especially don't want blackmail to be allowed, because they're the ones who would especially be vulnerable. It would enforce more norms on the powerful. And I have to say, the powerful people in our society do violate a lot of norms that the rest of us follow. They get away with it exactly because it's hard for people to call them on it, exactly because they have so many ways of retaliating. Anyway, so I'll just stop right there and let's continue.
Yeah, so I will briefly respond to that later point by saying that I actually disagree that that those who have power tend to be more vulnerable to blackmail and would be / are more targeted by blackmail. I think that power protects you from blackmail. You can threaten retaliation. You can protect yourself against it. You can better hide your secrets. You can be insulated from the consequences. I think we see this in many cases where, like, the people who are destroyed by smear campaigns, yes, you notice the famous people who are destroyed by smear campaigns and by information coming up, but mostly they are all right. It is the ordinary man on the street who loses their job when they are subject to cancellation, who cannot make their lives work.
Well, cancellation is a whole different thing. But if you looked actually at court cases where someone was accused of blackmail, I'm pretty sure you will find, you know, it's a very slants toward the powerful. I would
yes,
be very
that is
surprised
because
if actual court cases.
Yes, because if you try to
so
blackmail,
the law as practiced protects mainly the powerful because they're the people who the cases are about.
I believe that the threat of it being illegal and the modifications of people's willingness to behave because it's illegal changes how people behave substantially, and that making blackmail illegal doesn't just affect the cases in which blackmail is tried in court, but
it's gotta mainly affect the people who are actually prosecuted about it. If people like you and me, you know, if we are hardly ever, you know, nobody's ever sued for blackmail because they tried to blackmail you or me, that means people like you or me aren't protected much by the law against blackmail because it's
on the contrary, nobody's ever tried to blackmail me. And I'm very happy about that.
But it's not because there are these laws out there. If cases are about people like us, just don't show up much, right?
No, I think it is in part because of that. I think it is because it has not been normalized that blackmail is all right. I think it's because anyone who tried to set up a long-term blackmail, large-scale blackmail organization would be shut down. I think it is because we're not okay with this sort of thing. but also because people know that if they tried to extract a lot of resources, it wouldn't work. But I think you're right that the central point is not this. The central point is blackmail a net positive when it happens? Is blackmail good or bad in general? I do think we have to think, like, ideally on a sort of one level higher up to the as to whether or not allowing the blackmail causes good or bad things to happen in general. But I think we also have a disagreement about concretely when the blackmail happens. So in scenario one, I have information about someone and I'm allowed to blackmail them. In scenario two, I have information about someone and I'm not allowed to blackmail them. So if I'm not allowed to blackmail them, then I can choose to either share the information or not share the information. And I will share the information, presumably primarily on the basis of whether or not it helps me to share the information, whether or not I think it is useful and I'll be rewarded for sharing the information, versus it will be seen frightful and bad and punished.
So Zvi, let's go through step by step. Setting aside blackmail, do you think on average, people gossiping about other people and saying negative things about them is on average a good thing or not? Should we ban that? We could in principle ban saying negative things about anybody. Would you support that? Or do you think on average it's good to let people say negative things about other people?
I actually don't think interestingly, I don't think these are the same question. I think that, like, you can want to reduce it on the margin, but understand that banning all of it would be horribly bad. I think banning all the negative gossip would be horribly bad.
On what margin would you cut it down? On what margin would you ban people saying negative things about other people? What kind of margin would that be? Big things, people you know well, people you know less well? Pick a margin. If there's no margin, you can only do it on average, right?
No. I would ban people saying negative things, ideally in ways that are engineered to cause harm, but it's very difficult. I don't actually support a law banning.
What does it mean, engineered to cause harm? I know something about you, I tell it. Well, how is that engineered to cause harm?
Okay, so basically, if I try to cast you in the worst possible light, if I go through all of your past actions in order to try and present what appears to be a pattern of behavior, if I try to quote people out of context to make what you did look bad,
so two examples of that would be in, say, a divorce proceeding, somebody trying to make the other side look bad. Another example might be a mudraking sort of news article that tries to make somebody look bad. So you'd ban both of those. Just no, you can't try to consistently make somebody look bad. That's just not allowed. You always have to try to show good sides as well as bad sides in any presentation of other people. Is that a rule you'd endorse?
No, I think that is far too strong. But as I said, I would support making divorce proceedings private.
You're not allowed to tell people about how your spouse mistreated you? Are you really going to make a law saying you are not allowed to tell other people about how your spouse mistreated you?
I think you should have a law that, like, divorcing someone doesn't allow you to put them on the stand and then ask them about every little embarrassing thing in their lives and force it to go on the record so that you can.
What's that? Can I go to the press? Can I go tell my friends? Can I send out a newsletter to my friends? Can I say bad things about my spouse?
My model is that Zvi would happily have the divorce proceedings happen if they were private and allow people to say those things in public if they wanted to, but didn't want to set up a situation in which they were incentivized to publish those negative things about people. Is that right, Zvi?
Yes, but look, I grant Robin's point in general that
political contests, are politicians allowed to say negative things about their opponents, to try to dig up dirt, to put their opponents in the worst possible light? Is that a thing that people should be allowed to do?
I don't think it should be illegal, but I certainly think that the way that politics is practiced now should be discouraged and be considered against norms.
Well, the point I'm trying to establish is that you are, in general, accepting the idea that on average, it's good to let people gossip about other people, even when it's negative, if it's true. So I haven't said anything about false.
Yeah, I agree with that. To be explicit, like, in general, I agree with that. And I certainly think that, like, clamping down on that hard would be a very bad mistake.
Okay, so my argument will be that allowing blackmail just turns up the dial a bit on that. It gives the same kind of incentives, but it makes them a bit stronger.
So you see, that's what I disagree with. I don't think that what happens is every piece of information is 10% more likely to get out and be revealed to the public.
What number will you give? Not 10%, what? 20, 50, 100?
It wasn't that I disagree on the number. It's that I think that it affects different kinds of information radically differently.
What difference?
I think that information.
We're starting with a situation, remember, where somebody is trying to make somebody look bad. That's our presumption here in gossip, but not with blackmail allowed. And now we're adding blackmail. And you're saying, if we take a situation where somebody was trying to make someone look bad and we add the possibility of getting money out of them, that'll make things much worse. And I'm trying to push you on what's the margin there, right? In which kinds of situations, in what way is how worse?
Okay, so I think the typical case of blackmail involves finding something that would in fact cause a lot of harm, a lot of private harm to somebody. That's why you are able to blackmail them.
But that's also true for the other kinds of gossip we just talked about. When I'm trying to dig up dirt on you to make you look bad as my political opponent, yes, of course, you're going to be hurt if I find dirt.
Can I jump in and just add? I do think that it is not only the case that people who are looking to find dirt on you can use money in the situation. It also, I think, would increase substantially the incentive to find people who are trying to find dirt on you. A lot of people who are not trying to find dirt on you would suddenly start trying to find dirt on you because it would be profitable in a way that it previously.
They would also want to manufacture dirt on you, whether or not.
That's also true for the politician now, right? The politician wants to manufacture dirt on you if you can. Your divorce opponent wants to manufacture dirt on you. We are already in the situation. The news reporter wants to manufacture dirt on, say, Zuckerberg, right? Now, say if you're a published, if you're a newspaper person now and you want to make Zuckerberg look bad, a lot of people do, then they'll be looking for dirt, or Bezos, right? They're already in the situation where they have an incentive to be selective about just showing the bad things and to manufacture dirt if they could. That's already part of the situation we're comparing to. So I'm just asking if we add blackmail to that, but you have to grant that that's already
I'm saying blackmail radically. Okay, so I'm saying the more blackmail specifically selects for the scenarios in which there is great harm. Where, like, if you are choosing,
so does trying to make somebody look bad, right? That's the thing we're talking about. There are situations now where people are trying to make other people look bad. Either you want to ban those, or you have to accept that on average those are good, even though they contain the problems you're pointing to.
No, okay, so I think there's an important fallacy there that I can not want to ban something, but still think it's in general pretty bad. Like, I think that gossip in general is definitely very good. Right, sharing true information about people is obviously, in general, a good thing. I think that sharing information about people that happens to harm at least one person is still generally pretty good. I think sharing information about somebody which is chosen specifically engineered to harm someone, I think, in general, tends to be bad. However,
harm is it's intended to make you look bad relative to an audience, but that highlights that the audience wants to know and plausibly socially benefits from finding out. So somebody is trying to hide some dirt. Other people want to know the dirt for legitimate reasons. For most of these cases, there are good historical reasons why humans wanted to know these things about other people. And there are norms expressed in terms.
I don't think that expresses the primary mechanism in which you don't want it to get out and the primary mechanism by which it is harmed. I think that often the reason why you don't want it to get out is because you would get fired, right? Specific people would retaliate against you because they would not like particular things that you have to say.
If somebody's going to fire you for something you found out about you, then it's got to be something they disapprove of.
No!
Okay, Robin. So
Robin. So essentially your argument is that in today's world, if people online were to find out something about you and decide to cause a lot of trouble in your life based on this thing, that it must have been a bad thing that the public absolutely needed to know.
So you're going to an extreme, deterministic always claim.
All right, sorry. I retract the always. I retract the certainty. On
average, letting people know about other people, dirt is a good thing. On average, the incentives to not have dirt, the incentive to expose dirt are on average a good thing. Yes, they go wrong in many particular ways, but on average, they're good. That's my fundamental claim about why gossip is generally good, even when people are trying to find dirt in order to make someone look bad. And blackmail is just upping the incentives on that somewhat.
Okay, so there's a bunch of situations in which people look for bad material on people and they try and get negative information about them to punish them or to hurt them. And Robin's take is that these are often healthy and often good for society, and we don't want to ban these. And allowing blackmail would allow this to be this to work a bit more. It would allow financial incentives into this in a bigger way.
For most people, it's a small effect, but for the powerful, it's a much bigger effect.
Right.
And so that's how I distinguish the small. That's the main distinction, I would say. For people who have a lot of money or people for whom public opinion is very important, they will face a much bigger threat. It's a dials goes much up more for them, but I'm not sure that's a bad thing.
Okay. So Zvi, I think you understand that that's Robin's take, is that this generally allows what's the word for social accounting and finding out bad things about people to generally just be more efficient. Now, I don't think that's your take. I don't think you think that it just...
I have a list of like ways in which I disagree with this, and one of them is that I don't even think that allowing blackmail would increase the number of such things that were in fact revealed. I think it would decrease it.
Would decrease the number of things that were revealed.
But it's about the discouragement, less about the revealing, right? There are two ways to discourage something. One is to reveal it, and the other is to threaten to reveal it and to get and make you pay. Both discourage it.
Sure. So you think it would decrease it, and is it that part of the reason, Zvi? Because people would be sufficiently scared that they would be hiding a lot of information more, and on net, like being very, very secretive about their like information.
And
people would be more secretive, and in fact, sometimes when they were blackmailed, they would in fact pay. Other times, they would find credible threats of retaliation, and that would prevent the information from coming out. And I think that, in particular, like right now, when someone is determining whether or not to share gossip, they tend to share net useful gossip more than they tend to share net harmful gossip, and that blackmail reverses this incentive and also causes people to look for net harmful gossip rather than look for net helpful gossip. Like most of the time when people are looking for information, they're looking for information the public needs to know.
So explain that. So I'm open to that, but you need more of an argument. That's just a claim at the moment. Lay it out. What's the argument for that claim?
Okay. I believe that, most of the time, most people are not, when they seek information, primarily looking to harm someone. They're primarily looking to benefit themselves or benefit their friends or their allies in some way. Mm-hmm. That hurting someone else is mostly a side effect.
That's also true in blackmail. The main effect is the money, not the hurt.
Yes, but
their main motivation is to get the compensation.
Right. The main benefit is to gain the power over the person and to extract something of value, whether it's money or something else.
But that's not the same as hurting.
But the way that you do that is you gain the ability to hurt someone.
I disagree with that whole framing. So let me just Verizon, which is my person who supplies my internet, my phone, and my TV. They want me to really want their product. So the more that they can make me really desperate for their product, then the more I'm willing to pay for it. Of course, they do it, hopefully, by making their product attractive, but that is a way of gaining power over me. In general, all through society, when people are making deals with the other, in anticipation of those deals, they want to be in demand. They want to want the other party to want them. That's basically the same thing. It's all about, before a deal, wanting to have the other party want to make the deal. So that happens in marriages, it happens in jobs, it happens to me with Verizon. Is that harm? Is the effort that Verizon goes through to make sure that I don't want to be without their service, is that harming me because now it makes me more willing to pay for their service?
But doesn't Verizon do that by offering a benefit? Verizon creates a service that makes your life better so that you will be willing to buy it. So if Verizon were to say, cut the wires of their competition, so your competition couldn't come to your house and thereby threaten to cut off your service unless you paid them 10 times as much.
So that's what I said in my initial remarks about the reference point. You have in mind the reference point is I say nothing, and so I'm harming you by threatening to say something. But what if the reference was I was going to say it anyway, and you pay me not to say it? Well, now with respect to that reference point, I'm helping you by letting you pay me not to say it. So it all comes down to what's the reference behavior you thought would have happened instead.
This has been quite good. I think maybe we have a comment from a commenter who wanted to jump in. I think Oliver Habrica was going to add in something. Ollie, do you want to say something from the chat?
Yeah. So just to clarify, my current sense of something like what Zvi's point is something like right now we have an optimization process that like isn't perfect, but it's something like means that you share information. If that information has public value, you're encouraged to share it because the public might reward you for it. In a world of blackmail, the thing that would maximize your payoff would be to choose this thing that allows you to cause the highest harm for the other person you're talking to, such that you can then extract the most money, such that like in a moment you have, like if you can cause someone $10,000 of damages in like spreading some type of information, then you can extract approximately $10,000. Obviously, game theory is hard. It's not fully obvious for how that, like when exactly that works out, but roughly you're like incentivized to maximize the harm for the other person. And to me, it seems pretty clear that those can diverge. And in particular that like the classic, the obvious example here is like publishing someone's like account password, where like right now I have no incentive if I'm like, oh, like not a very strong incentive. Like if I'm debating with someone else to like, even if I want to make them look bad, to like publish their private passwords, if it like the thing that would damage like their private passwords is just, losing access to all of their accounts and like all the kind of indirect damage that would cause. But I can totally use it as blackmail material because it is a direct thing that would cause damage to them.
Remember one of our other options is just to ban some kinds of gossip. So I said we do properly ban, telling people's passwords or their naked pictures. If you think there's a kind of gossip that's just harmful, you just ban that kind of gossip. We're talking about, allowing that gossip, except when one side makes an offer to pay the other, but not the vice versa. That's the puzzle we're talking about, not just the generic that some things you might not want to let people gossip about.
Before you respond to Robin, Zvi, could I get your sense of whether that was an accurate summary of your position from the things that Ollie was saying? Or was that a part?
I think that is a summary of it's a reasonable summary of one of my positions. One recent example of potential blackmail was, what if someone were to blackmail Scott Alexander and threaten to reveal his true name?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But again, you can have privacy rules about that. If you just want to say you're not allowed to reveal people's anonymous names, just make that the rule. You're talking about it would be okay if it was gossiped, but not if it wasn't. But that's not true in this case, right? You think it would be bad even if this was revealed without monetary incentive.
So it sounds like Robin's getting a lot of work out of this. Yes, there are a couple of bad cases, but you can just outlaw those. Whereas my model of Zvi feels like those bad cases are innumerable and massive. And like by default,
both they are innumerable and large. And also, I think that banning the action itself is impractical. You would have way too much splash damage. Like you basically, it is often,
wait. Let me hear Zvi reply to finish the sentence. Zvi?
There are often things which we would like not to happen, but which we know if we banned them would have negative effects, and therefore we shouldn't do that. And I think the best reason not to blend back, the best argument against blackmail is the libertarian argument. There's weird side effects that you don't like. In fact. And I certainly think that holds true. Like if you banned NDAs, there are types of business you simply could not do, for example.
So so instead of proposing a bunch of smaller bans, you're proposing a much larger ban, which I think.
So I don't think it's about size. I think it's about if you can identify the kinds of gossip. So it's about whether just the simplest policy is to either require or ban gossip. We're talking about a more complicated thing when we go down to you can say it, but you're not allowed to be paid to say it, or you're only allowed to be paid to say it if they make the offer and not you. That's the more complicated version. The simplest one is just to let people say it or not say it. We already have slander and libel laws. Those are laws about what you're allowed to say. We have other sorts of privacy laws. We have and do enforce lots of laws on what you're allowed to say and what you're not allowed to say. That doesn't, if your problem can be solved with those, just solve it with those. Why invoke this more complicated thing?
So does that seem like it solves the situation for you, Zvi? Does it feel like there is enough, like, we can just ban the specific kind of bad outcomes that would happen from it?
No, I do not think we could possibly enumerate a rule that we would want. First of all, sometimes, it will be correct to want to share those things because, in fact, there is enough of a positive need to share them, and you'll want to share them.
So about passwords, you don't want to make a law against sharing passwords. You want to let me share passwords if I can find it out. You just don't want me to ask for money for it. That's your solution.
I mean, that's the current situation, isn't it?
I don't think that. So, my claim is not that there are no things we want to ban you. We want to outright ban you from sharing. I'm saying there will be a lot of things that we cannot enumerate and ban you from sharing that we nevertheless want to tax the sharing of.
So can you say more about why you think that? Can you say more about why you think that, Zvi?
Show us one.
I mean, so sharing Alexander's name was supposed to be like the obvious basic example of this. I do think that in general, sharing private conversations of various types which cause mobs to come after people is similar. But let me just, okay, so a specific example of...
Yeah, go for it.
Sorry, I'm trying to, example of things we want. So, I do think airing people's dirty laundry out in public in general is...
Give us something. I mean, it's really hard to do this without some concrete examples.
Okay. Sure.
Alexander's password to find concrete example is fine. I'm concerned, but it seems to me either we want to allow people to air those things, or not. I would be fine with saying, hey, you're not anonymous name. You're not allowed to, publish the anonymous name unless you figured it out independently or something. But you don't want to do that. You want to let people reveal anonymous names, except unless they're being paid for it.
No. That's sorry. I think you said that wrong, right? I'm not saying you can't pay me to reveal the information. I'm saying you can't blackmail me with the threat of revealing the information. You can't demand payment.
Right. You can't demand from Alexander the payment. You can demand it from a newspaper, the New York Times.
I also can't demand it from someone else who would be afraid of it being revealed, who isn't Alexander. Like, I think this is one thing to note is that if you
but
can
you're just making claims. Tell us why that's good or bad. So again, the key thing isn't whether certain information should be revealed or not. It's whether you should add this extra complexity. So again, we always have the option to ban gossip or to require it. But what we have is this weird rule where you're allowed to do it in trade for other things, but not for money. But you are allowed to do it for money if one side makes the offer, but not the other side makes the offer. This is the thing I find very hard to justify. I can understand why some things should be private and some things should be published and some things should be allowed to set and some things not. But why this weird combination of not the money unless one side makes the offer, but not the other? You haven't addressed this one side versus the other thing at all in your entire conversation here, right? You haven't addressed the possibility of an NDA doing all of these examples you don't like.
All right, Robin, I think I have a clear impression of the thing that you're looking for. I think Zvi now is wanted to take us a few seconds to think of a concrete example that he wanted to give that like met some of these conditions. It doesn't have to be all.
I can think of a number of examples of information about me that I think should fall into this category, but I obviously don't want to use them as examples.
Let's talk about Mr. Smith. Tell me about some information about Mr. Smith.
Who is
Robin,
totally not me. Now,
and then Robin. I wanted to also mention that I felt like, I don't know if this is to your point, Zvi, I felt like that often the boundary lines around privacy, private information is kind of difficult to do. Like I remember reading that a case about doxing of someone's home address, and I was like, well, that seems bad. And they were like, oh no, they were just going to show like a photo of the house that was not going to like show the number or something. And I was like, oh, does that feel bad? And then like drawing a lot of the lines around privacy seemed kind of difficult.
I mean, typically 5 minutes later, someone figures out where the house is.
Yeah.
is the actual.
So it's not easy necessarily to decide rules about privacy and rules about what you're allowed to gossip. But I'm just saying that's a separate issue from blackmail. Well, because blackmail doesn't help make that any easier, right? If you say you can't blackmail about the house, you already have to settle the question whether you can tell about the house, right? You have to settle the question whether that's appropriate information before you decide whether you want to allow that as part of blackmail. Allowing blackmail just adds more complexity.
Okay, so let's use the example of a doxing. I think that's a reasonable example of something that I think we should discourage. Mm-hmm. But that, you know.
Why not just make it illegal? Why not simply say not allowed to dox? Done.
So you're not allowed to ever reveal where anybody lives.
They don't want it.
You have to get informed. You have to get like consent of anybody to reveal their location, or else you're guilty of a crime. Is the proposal?
It's that or allow it, but what the hell does blackmail have to do with that? That's my point.
Okay. So what blackmail does is blackmail shifts the incentives as to whether or not you choose to find out where somebody lives. It shifts the incentive as to whether or not you choose to reveal where somebody lives. It shifts the incentives of what it means to be someone who doesn't want their house revealed. So if blackmail is not allowed, then there is much less incentive of somebody to go searching for my address to then blackmail me about where my address is.
I feel like there's a fairly simple setup here where if somebody is like looking to hurt me and looking to maybe rob me or looking to hurt me some way and is looking for my address, by default, there is not a lot of people who are incentivized to find this bad person and give them my address. Like most people who know me and who know my address won't go looking for this person and won't go trying to find that deal. Whereas as soon as they can get financial money out, a lot of money out of me, this is suddenly incentive for them to make that relationship and to like make that easier for someone to hurt me, which I think was not there beforehand.
But are you willing to make the claim that this is to be disallowed only if one side makes the offer and not the other side makes the offer? Again, so Zvi hasn't addressed that at all.
What is the other side in that situation? Would it be the bad person?
So if I say, hey, I've got addresses on people, anybody want to pay me for them? That's one side, and the other side is somebody says, hey, I'd like to know the address. Who will pay me to find that out?
Should you be able to pay people to find addresses?
You can actually, normally, but not in every case, but in many cases.
I feel like probably it is good to be able to opt out of such a system where your address will not be sold by default. So which side was that, Robin? So that was, yeah.
Well, again, the analog with blackmail is we're only making it illegal if one side makes the offer but not the other. That seems to me the hardest part to rationalize. I could see you saying you're not allowed to sell addresses. I could see you are saying you are allowed to sell addresses. But why say you're only allowed to sell if one side makes the offer but not if the other side?
I feel like in part, like selectively is selecting against. Sorry, I tapped the microphone there. Selecting against the people who can most easily hurt your life. So I feel like the person who wants to hurt me can like put up a certain level of bounty or something, But I feel like suddenly everyone who has this information about me will be given an incentive to like make a lot of money out of hurting me, whereas most people would not go in the other direction. That was a bit abstract. That was a bit vague. Zvi, I'm curious if you have a similar sense that most people are not looking to, most people around me are not looking to hurt me, whereas
Okay, so basically, I think Robin is basically saying this can't possibly be a first best solution.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there's always going to be a better alternative. Is that a...
I'm arguing for the simpler policies relative to this strange complexity.
The problem, okay, so I think that obviously this is a strange complexity to introduce. It is weird. It doesn't appear in very many other places. However, it gets around a different complexity, which is we would then have to enumerate exactly which things were.
But that's going to be true regardless. So think about the analog with prostitution. So say you say prostitution's illegal as long as the prostitute makes the offer, but not if the John makes the offer. And then you could say, well, you like prostitution or you don't. It has problems and what doesn't. But what social problems are solved by saying only if one side makes the offer is it legal, but not if the other side makes the offer? That's what we're doing with blackmail. NDAs are exactly blackmail, but the other side initiates the offer. You're okay with NDAs?
I feel, Robin, like I'm confused. I feel like in the world where blackmail is legalized, you don't expect me to get blackmailed anymore or something. Or like, because you currently think it's one way. You currently think that everyone who has the information about me that could hurt me is very willing to sell it, but they are not allowed to blackmail me into getting it. But other people are not allowed to buy it. But I think that if blackmail
so
was
just to be clear, if any of you feel inclined to blackmail, Ben Pace, for example, what you do is you go to him and you say, I know this thing about you. I'm sorry to hear this thing about you. Bad things could happen to you. I'm very sympathized with it. Let me know if I can help in any way. And then you walk away. And it's up to Ben to figure out that you're implicitly threatening him with revealing this information. But he never said anything. So the whole deal can go forward or not, but it's up to you to now make the next step. That's what the law actually achieves, is this sort of indirect process. It doesn't stop the deal from happening. It stops.
But it often does.
Yeah,
right.
So a substantial event.
But okay, Robin, concretely, right? If we legalize blackmail, do you think we would see substantially more things that are basically blackmail than we do now?
We would see it in the realm of people who aren't very smart and don't know what they're doing and don't know the law, which of course, is limited because they might not even know blackmail is illegal now or know how. So it will just force more people to hire lawyers to do things. And I'm not sure it'll make more of a difference in situations where people don't know, aren't very smart, and don't know the smart way to do things.
So I strongly disagree. I think that legalizing blackmail would vastly increase the amount of blackmail that occur.
Among the powerful, and I think for ordinary people, it's pretty clear. I mean, most of us can blackmail each other and get away with it, honestly, but we don't. It's the rich people who have a high public profile. They will be the people who will be most targeted for blackmail.
Well, I actually think we do. This is actually another disagreement. I talked about this in my blackmail post, if you remember, that I basically think that things of the form of blackmail are actually pretty common. Like you talked about the whole if you tell that secret, I'll tell mine, or like if you don't do X, I'll say about Y. I think this is pretty constant throughout everybody's day. I think people are constantly threatened. I think people.
Well, so that's what I mean. The blackmail law isn't changing things much. If it's happening and it's already illegal, then the law against it isn't doing much.
I think that it is still holding it back substantially, and I think it would get much, much worse.
Okay, I mean, I still think the core thing here is if it happens more, is that bad? And so I want to compare it to the situation. You're saying it's because people want to harm other people. I say, no, it's people just trying to get money, but they are preferentially looking for things that make you look bad. But we already have people preferentially looking for things that make other people look bad. In a number of the situations I identified, you didn't want to ban those. You wanted to allow those as part of gossip. The situations where people are trying to make someone look bad, why add some more situations like that due to allowing blackmail? Why are those situations on average bad while the first set of situations
so
are
we can agree that there are things which we would like to discourage, we'd like to see less of, but that we don't want to ban, right?
Give me an example of it, and I'll tell you whether I agree with it. I'm not sure. I mean, I need to see.
I'm trying to think of an example that won't get me mobbed.
Look, standard examples for blackmail. Examples of blackmail, of course, a crime.
So, for example, Bill
sexual
Clinton said,
affair, people blackmail about affairs, say the Letterman example, those are, I mean, most people when they're thinking about blackmail, they are probably thinking about affairs and sexual things. That's
right. So,
what
like you would not want to ban people from having affairs, I presume. You think that would be bad, like make it illegal.
I don't want to ban people from telling about affairs. I think
Well,
if other
you
people
also-
look, if somebody knows that you had an affair and they think less of you, I think they should be allowed to think less of you because you had an affair, and they should be allowed to find out about it if they find out about a legitimate way.
But
They can't bug you. You can't let them put a camera in your house to find out. But if they find out in some legitimate way that you had an
To be
affair,
clear,
they should be
I
allowed
do
to say it.
think there's a question of scale. Like, I am okay with you telling a bunch of people that I like did something bad. I feel like bad if you like managed to get it on the front page of the New York Times or something. I feel like
Depends on who you are. If you're an ordinary person, it won't go on the front page of the Times.
Well, if you're an
right?
ordinary person, but if I'm a rich person who's not like very important in a lot of other ways, if I just have a lot of resources to like be given, even though it is not important about how I use those, then I think the blackmail now makes it much more likely that information about me will get to a level of like prominence and like life-destroying damage that like it would not previously, just because I have a lot of resources you can steal.
But why is it bad if New York Times readers find out about it, but not if other people find out about it? Why is that the thing that makes it bad?
Because I think there's a level of punishment that information gossiping should do to you. And in general, people sharing it when it seems useful feels like it will hit the balance of like, it will get shared as much as is useful. But people sharing it for as much resources they can take, I think will encourage much over punishment.
But also note that I think often the thing we are actually punishing when we punish a norm violation is not that the person violated the norm, so they got caught. We are explicitly saying everybody violates these norms all the time, but if you got caught breaking the norm, it means you probably break the norm all the time, and you probably break lots of other norms. And you
but
probably
if you think that's the only problem, you don't think that should be a norm, that you think it's a mistaken norm. And I'm happy to accept there are mistaken norms, but I just don't think they're typical. I think most norms are productive, useful norms. Some norms aren't, and these things change over time. But I think
almost no norm norm violation of mine should be on the front page of the New York Times. And if I have enough resources, then it will get there if you allow blackmail.
Well, I think you want your public stance to be that you do follow the norms, and therefore you do want to.
No, my public stance is that I sometimes break norms, and I still should not have my life destroyed.
So regarding the New York Times, it's interesting that when I worked for a certain corporation, which I will not name, we had a principle that we could not put in any written form any statement that we would not want in the front page of the New York Times. And so the very fact that someone might threaten to cause harm to us or decide to cause harm to us by sharing this meant that we had to be much more implicit, keep less records, destroy evidence, much less rational.
That's a general cost of norms. I mean, the norm system has costs, okay? I mean, it's unique to humans. Other animals didn't have it, and it's part of the power of humanity that we've had and enforced norms, but norm systems definitely have costs. One of them is we sometimes have wrong norms. Sometimes we misenforce norms in that we draw the wrong conclusions about who violated which norms. And we may well punish too much or too little in other situations, but still, average norms are good.
But so like I'm not saying norms are bad or that we shouldn't in general enforce norms. However, if we have a norm, which I believe that we do have, that it is a much stronger norm violation to be prominently caught and to become common knowledge that you violated a norm, partly because it weakens the norm itself, which people consider bad. Partly because it provides evidence of other acts.
Let me make the analog to law enforcement. You could say, well, if somebody is found guilty of a crime, they have to be found guilty just by somebody noticing it and reporting it without any financial incentives whatsoever. But we don't do that. We create people who have financial incentives to discover and report crimes. That shows that we don't just want the simple gossip incentives about crime. We want to add and strengthen the incentive.
Okay, so let's compare two possible incentive schemes then, right? Incentive scheme one is where if I discover that you committed a crime, I can blackmail you and maybe I get money from you. In incentive scheme two, if I discover you had a crime, I can go to the police and the police give me a reward.
Well, there's the third one, which is you have the choice between the two.
And the third one, I have a choice between the two. Sure.
Right. You can do both.
So, right. If I get rewarded by the police, then to the extent that society considers it important to catch a particular norm violation, I will be incentivized to catch that particular norm violation. Right? So like if they give a big reward for murder, I'll investigate murders a lot more enthusiastically than I'll investigate.
Society via the legislature, but society via gossip will also be the channel that punishes through.
But that was not going. You would not get punished in proportion to how much society cares about it. You get punished in proportion to how much resources the person has. Those two are not the same.
No, that's not true. the resource sets the limit, but of course, if it's a mildly embarrassing thing, then you won't pay very much to pay off the blackmailer. The amount of how much you pay off the blackmailer is proportional to how bad it would be if it got out, which is basically based on how many people care and how much do they care.
It's based on how much they can, it's based on what would actually happen to you as a result of that and how much you care about that thing and the resources that you have and so on. Certain people.
Right, but so these are two different channels. I'm endorsing both channels. I have a formal legal system where we have things formally as crimes and they're formally punished by legislators deciding to set resources to the police and fines. That also we have a system of blackmail wherein people are paid financially in other ways for their doing things that the audience will disapprove of. Those are two different ways that the larger world disapproves and discourages things.
I also feel continually like the level at which society wants to like hurt you or get your private information is not really often in proportion to how much it is like they think it is just to hurt you, or I think it is just to hurt you. I feel like there is a lot of like tabloid press that will just like hurt you because it gets them like attention and they can join in gossip in a big conversation in a way that I think like probably collectively, or certainly I don't endorse, and I think most people don't endorse.
Well, why not make that illegal then, Ben?
I think illegal is a strong and kind of silencing things is a very strong.
Well, that's true for blackmail as well. Why
but I think not positiving incentive.
No, I don't think it
is good.
So, Benny, why does blackmail have a chilling effect? Right? Like, what?
Well, so the mudraking journals have a chilling effect, of course. I mean, they all have a chilling effect. The question is whether it's too much.
But Robin, like, which is your stake that the tabloids shouldn't do that to people and it should be illegal, or is your stake that no, we should have this and encourage it more with more money? Like,
I'd say that on average, the tabloids exposing things about people is on average a good thing. It goes wrong in many particular ways, but I do not want to ban the tabloids from writing exposés.
I don't want to ban them from writing exposés, but I currently think the situation is kind of like blackmail, in which they will extract way more resources than is proportional, and on net do a massive amount of damage.
I don't see that.
I don't want to ban the National Enquirer, but I do think the world would be better off without it.
There's a niche there. If they weren't there, someone else would come into.
Well, yes, and I don't actually want to get rid of that specific publication because another publication would take its place. But I do believe the world would be better off if that sort of thing was not present somehow. However, I don't see a way to enact a law that would do that without having very bad secondary effects that I do not want.
I also think, Robin, you are definitely encouraging more of that stuff. Do you currently think it would be better if that whole class of thing, the whole sort of press doing hit pieces on people, was on net incentivized more with financial?
Well, I mean, over the last few decades, technology has made a big change in how many things are how easy, right? It is becoming, with more surveillance, with more easy publications, et cetera, it is becoming easier to find out dirt on people and to publicize it. And that's a change that's happened. And I don't think, that the way things were 20 years ago was the optimum, and therefore we're worse now, right? So if I'm not very confident that we're worse than we used to be, then I can't be very confident that it wouldn't be even better to keep going more.
Okay, so you're not sure whether or not this stuff on net has been bad. And that seems fair on total. I feel like tabloid press, I feel mostly pretty confident on net has gotten worse. Okay, I think we're going to move to Q&A soon. I think I want to give Zvi a minute, like an actual 60 seconds by the clock of pause for Zvi to gather thoughts and respond to any big picture things that he feels is missing. Because I feel like there's lots of small points that Zvi could make, but I feel like I do want to give Zvi 60 seconds. So Zvi, I'm going to put a timer and then you're going to set where we're going to move to next in the conversation. Does that sound good?
Sure.
Cool. 6 seconds start now.
Okay, so I think there's two things that I think
I was going to say you could have 60 seconds of silence if you want to think about it.
Oh, okay, sure.
Cool. Starting now.
You need the Jeopardy music to be going on.
Okay, I'm good. Yeah.
No
need to. Okay. So what I've been trying to get at with these examples is that there is a difference between the things that blackmail encourages and the things that blackmail discourages, and that they have a different proportion of harms and benefits and are different. They include all of the things in the range, but they include them in very different ways from the things that would be that are encouraged by other systems of gossip, other incentives to say things. And I think in a sense that makes those things much more negative. In particular, the incentive to entrap, the incentive to create negative material, to induce norm violations is much, much stronger under blackmail. And the fear of such things happening in general, and the cost of navigating blackmail situations, and the fear of having to deal with these things is very bad. I would feel very stressed living under a blackmail legal regime. So would my wife, for example. But also, I've also been trying to drive the distinction between something that I dislike and want to see less of and something I would make illegal, which I think that Robin would in general agree with, but we've been, sidetracked before. I can sort of nail him on that as such. But the idea that there are many things that I disapprove of, and I think that if we had less of them, the world would be a better place, but that there is no law that I can pass that banning it that would not have bad other effects, but I can try to tax it, right? I can make it more costly. I can make it more inconvenient in ways that discourage the behavior. And maybe that's even better than banning it, because now when it was really worth doing, it happens anyway.
Okay. So the summary there was there was a distinction between banning things and taxing things that you wanted to point
right,
out.
and by tax, I don't mean literally like you must pay 5%. I mean, I'm going to make this more annoying for you, right? I'd ideally like to literally tax it, but because that's not practical, I can make it harder. And
why was that better than banning? Why was that? What was going wrong with the banning situation?
What's going wrong with the banning is sometimes there would be good reasons to do the thing and you'd want to pay the tax. And we don't want to necessarily discourage that too much. Just in general, like when you ban things, when the government bans things, it has bad follow-on effects in many cases. And I don't want to get into why I'm a libertarian in this podcast, but I am, and I believe Robin is as well.
So I imagine Robin would agree that sometimes it's good to tax things rather than ban things.
I definitely agree. Although it adds another parameter that you have to optimize so you can get it wrong. But yeah, on average, it's better.
Okay.
So, can I make also a final statement here, or is that what we're doing?
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily final.
Okay.
We're going to go to Q&A.
It sounds like we're about to move to Q&A. So
yeah, go
ahead.
I guess, I want to make this point. So my claim was not so much that blackmail is good, but that no one had offered concrete, clear, consequentialist arguments for why blackmail should be banned, especially relative to allowing NDAs in terms of who makes the offer. That's my strongest claim.
Sure.
And my claim especially is about coming up with explicit reasons and arguments. So it's about this fact that in society, we just have a lot of policies that if you look at them, you're not sure what the justification is. If you ask people, they give you various justifications, they're contradictory. And I think it's a sad situation. We don't have clear justifications for most of our policy. I say for this one, we do it, but we don't have a clear reason. So Zvi has mostly pointed, I think, in my mind, to logical possibilities that it could be bad, but he hasn't actually offered data or concrete evidence that it is bad. He's just saying like it could be, so I've tried to narrow down the difference of saying like, let's think about the gossip where people are doing it for money, but it's not for money from that person, or the offer was made the other way, or they're doing it to dig up mud and things like that. And in those cases, we have all the problems he pointed to of people maybe faking evidence and people trying to overblow it and looking at, whatever it is, the most salacious. Those are all problems with gossip as we have it in terms of allowing people to gossip as much as they want, basically, unless it's false or through some of the usual exceptions, including privacy. And so my main strongest claim will be, look, it might happen to be true that this extra category turns out to make things worse, although the things just close to it that look almost like it are not bad. The parameter just happens to switch right there, but you haven't offered concrete evidence that it's actually bad, in the sense of if we were just trying to collectively do policy on the basis of what our evidence is, we don't have evidence that says that's bad.
So just before we get to Q&A, I'm curious, what would you expect to see if I told you that someone had this kind of concrete evidence? Like, what would you expect it to look like?
I would look at evidence about gossip, about the consequences of gossip in various situations, and when on average gossip is good or bad, so that you could then say this kind of gossip is bad, and including various amounts of how powerful is the person, how whether it's sexual gossip, whether it's financial gossip, etc., and the kinds of audience it has, how big the audience, any sort of data on the overall harm of gossip, to me is the key point, because blackmail is just the threat of gossip. So if gossip is okay, the threat to gossip is okay. And if gossip discourages things via, telling people about bad things, then the threat to not tell but have to pay also discourages. Anyway, that's my summary point.
Thank you very much.
With NDAs, I don't want to give my long spiel, but I do think that NDAs are necessary in certain ways to engage in certain types of activity, especially legal types of activity and business types of activity, and that therefore we can't ban them outright. But I'm not going to get into details, and I don't expect
But that allows, as long as the other party makes the offer, that allows blackmail.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Zvi, for the point about NDAs. Thanks, Robin. All right, I think probably Oliver Habrica will be able to suggest who can ask a good question. That's because I think my chat just says 99.
I have 154 things in chat, so someone must be asking a question.
I'm not reading the chat. Ollie, do you want to suggest? Oh, maybe I should read the chat. I'll open the chat.
Yeah, give me like, we'll need like 5 to 10 seconds. It's just like I just have to like read through and get a sense of which questions are still relevant.
Okay, I see mostly statements rather than questions, but I'm sure there are questions.
Yeah.
I see a question by Miguel Roquefort asking about NDAs and whether secrets are known in advance or not.
Yeah, Miguel, you're free to put on the microphone and video and ask a question. Also, Habrica, if there's someone else you wanted to pick, you're welcome to do that. Oh, actually, Michael made that point. Who's Michael?
7:16 p.m. is the chat item I see that's by Miguel Roquefort.
I would also be happy probably for Mr. R. You hit a Q, which I think means question. I don't know what the norms are, but Mr. R, if you wanted to ask a question.
Yeah, I guess I did.
Cool, go for it.
I wanted to ask a question for Robin. How it seems like blackmail is probably a thing that goes on in the political stage, especially the world stage. Do you think that there's any sorts of evidence for how much of, like, how many gains have been made using this, whether or not the global theater is better off for it or not?
Cool.
I don't have strong opinions. One thing that is noteworthy is that powerful organizations who are able to collect blackmail information gain power. So famously, say J. Edgar Hoover got a lot of blackmail information about senators and other people in government and gained a lot of power over government through the information he could collect. And arguably you'd say that's a problem with, government police having a lot of the extra powers they have and discretion they have to selectively get information and use it to blackmail. So this is a generic, if you want to think about canceling the police or limiting the police or reforming the police, the ability of police to blackmail people is actually a serious problem because they have more effective abilities to collect information and to save it up.
But isn't that information generally good because it's information on non-violating stuff that people want to gossip about?
On average. Yes. But still, it creates an asymmetry in terms of who has the information. If only Hoover has it, then Hoover gets less extra power. So I would rather there be a more competitive market for blackmail. I don't want a monopolist blackmailer. I would rather many different people have the ability to collect information.
Oh, you're a man of the people. I see. Okay.
Yeah. I think it's very hard to know the order of magnitude of the effect of blackmail on political action, precisely because this is one of the places where we're likely never to find out if the blackmail occurred, whether or not it succeeded. Even if it failed, we're likely never to find out that the person was previously blackmailed before the information was revealed, whether or not they paid interim. But I think we should certainly be concerned. We don't know what happened with Jeffrey Epstein, for example. We don't know who he did or did not have blackmail material on, who Maxine Gladwell may or may not have blackmail material on, how severe it is, how much influence they got over policy, how much money or policy was redirected. But I don't think that I think we should hope that it is less influence and less change of policy and less direction of money rather than more. Similarly, if the Russians got information on Donald Trump or other political people, I'm not saying they did, I'm not saying they didn't, we should hope that they have less and they got less rather than that they got more and have more. As just as concrete examples, right? In general,
I think politicians with the threat of blackmail and other things do behave better. I think blackmail is making politicians behave better.
Okay, I think blackmail causes politicians to behave worse in a much more important sense, in the sense that they are likely to work for the blackmailers, to do what the blackmailers want rather than what the people want. And I think that's much more important than who they're sleeping with.
Oliver Habriger, it looks like you yourself have a question, perhaps informed by the conversation.
Yes.
Trying to check your
So-
video on?
Oh, yes. So I want to try, like, I think one of the key things that I've been confused by is something like, what concretely would Robin want to see? And I have a model here, and maybe I will try stating it, and you can just tell me whether it's right or not. My current guess of what you actually want is something like, okay, this reminds me a bit of the last discussion we had about like variolation and COVID and a variety of things, where my model is more something like, you're like, I think blackmail could be good. I think we want to start with like repealing like the existing blackmail laws that we have. And then you expect that there's like a lot of follow-up legal work that will have to happen to be like, yes, and then we do actually need to figure out all the new things we have to like outlaw. Like we're going to be opening up a bunch of behaviors that were previously illegal, that are now legal, a bunch of stuff is going to happen. And a model is, you're not like, let's immediately go and like pass legislation to outlaw blackmail, but your model is more something like, let's go and try to figure out all the new legislations and switch towards a new paradigm where blackmail is legal, but lots of other new things are now illegal, which like in total complexity would hopefully add up like to something less complex than, or at least less confusing than the current blackmail situation.
If the system could handle it, I would prefer to do incremental changes to see how they go. I mean, yes, there's obviously, you know, fewer chances of things going badly if you can make incremental changes. That is, you could pick, say, 10 areas that blackmail could be applied to, and you know, this year we'll take the first area, the next year the second area, and do one by one and see how things change. And of course, the other thing is, you might believe that making various sorts of new privacy rules would be a good substitute for blackmail, which I might accept. And so you might want to think about, okay, if we allow blackmail about relationships, maybe we should just ban gossip about relationships. And maybe that will address the things you're really worried about, and I might be okay with that. I might be okay with new rules banning some kinds of gossip or requiring other kinds of gossip, because that's, at least to me, cleaner and more, you know, coherent than, again, banning deals for money if one side makes the offer but not the other, but still letting people say whatever they want.
Cool. America, is that good?
Yeah, that I definitely have like small follow-up questions, but I don't think they're worth going into big space.
That makes sense. I guess overall, one of my sort of intuitive responses to Robin is that, like, I can just think of a lot of situations of blackmail that mostly felt bad towards people with power, and that I expect wouldn't have happened if, would generally be disincentivized. Like, a lot of people want to take money out of rich people, but they don't actually care about like having control over like their job or like their like prestige in society. And I feel like this punishes people specifically to their financial resources and not to their actually other, like, in proportion to how important it is that their power is good. Their power should be regulated.
Well, this might be related to my thinking. You can't trust your officials as much as most people seem to think they do. Most people seem to think that if, you know, a judge doesn't have any obvious stake in one side or the other, we can just trust them to be neutral. And I just don't think in general officials are as neutral, as trustworthy as they are assumed to be when, you know, in most ordinary cases. So
I mean, I don't think they can be assumed to be good in lots of cases, but I don't think that like the norms of like what will be most embarrassing for them is actually proportional to like what is the most bad that they do.
So of course, if you have an official who, say a judge, for whom it's illegal to say, make the case go one way or the other based on some other consideration, then if they're blackmailed and they do that, that is illegal, right? That is a different way of making that blackmail illegal. It's already illegal for the judge to take money to favor one side, or not to take money, but to sort of keep their secret. If the judge makes a deal to keep to favor one side in a case because somebody promises then not to tell the judge's secret, that's already illegal. We don't need an extra blackmail law to make that illegal.
Sorry, I didn't quite follow that. Which part is already illegal?
So if you have a judge, they're not allowed to use other considerations, personal considerations, to make their decision on the case. Similarly, for other sorts of public officials.
Yes.
It's already illegal for them. So the scenario that the judge makes a decision one way in the case versus the other because somebody says, if you don't make my decision my way, I will reveal your secret. That blackmail there is not a blackmail I'm going to be making legal, because I might make blackmail in general legal, but I'm not making it legal for that official to be biased in that case. That's already a law against that. We already have laws for public officials and such things.
So I feel like in general, I'm pretty open to like creating financial bounties for giving me information on public officials that will cause me to fire them. Like if I am their boss and I find out they do a bad thing, this financial bounty is great. I feel like otherwise,
Me too.
I am not that. I feel like just trying to embarrass them or just trying to like extract as much money as you can out of them is no longer.
But again, the problem isn't that they get embarrassed. The problem is that their decisions are corrupted. That was what Zvi was pointing to. He's worried the public officials' decisions will be corrupted because of blackmail. And I'm saying that kind of blackmail is already illegal for other reasons than blackmail being illegal. It's illegal for an official to make these decisions based on these personal considerations. And we could force that law much more strongly if we like. I'm fine with public officials' lives being recorded, fully recorded, and available for enforcement to check up on these things.
I think overall you would find that those decisions did get made more for personal reasons if you allowed blackmail, because the amount of pressure on them to make it for personal reasons would escalate like massively.
I'm happy to turn up the dial on whatever mechanisms we have for preventing that. If we're not doing enough now, let's do more.
But the specific punishment is we should punish the like civilians who like go in and become blackmailers is the current situation. Whereas if that's not allowed, then we'd only be able to punish people for accepting the blackmail.
I mean, they're already violating these rules, and public officials are being paid off in many ways to do things. That's already true.
All right. Jacob says Ronnie Fernandez wanted to make a statement. Ronnie, I am curious, whatever your thoughts are, they do not need to be immediately connecting to the thing we just said. But if you have an audio, I would be interested to hear it. Go on, Ronnie, I know you'll speak. Is he not here?
What's going on?
All right, in that case, Jacob has a question, and then Alyssa Vance has a question.
Cool. So yeah, it's perhaps more of a confusion than a question. So ordinarily in markets, we want things to be priced appropriately, which is partially accomplished by there being competition among suppliers to drive the price down, and some competition among buyers that pushes the price up until these things meet. But I'm really confused how similar mechanisms would look like in the case of blackmail. In particular, it seems like my secrets are valuable to me precisely because they are about me. It's not clear who I would like compete with or something to ensure I could actually get a fair deal. And it just seems like much more one-sided, that people just like trying to push me to my limit of what I'm able to pay. So this is more of like a confusion than a very crisp question. But I'd be curious if Robin could address like how blackmail markets would reach equilibrium, and how why information should be like appropriately priced.
So my understanding of how this works, I've never been in a blackmail market, but basically there's only one buyer and the hope is there's only one seller. And so the seller wants to sell you the information because presumably the information is not that valuable to the seller. What the seller can get for it on the open market might be zero. It might be less than zero. They might have to like make an effort to share the information at cost for themselves rather than get a benefit. And therefore their alternative to a negotiated agreement is very low. They get little or nothing or even a negative amount. But your alternative to a negotiated agreement is also very bad, right? Like you lose because the information gets out, and presumably you don't want that. So, and sometimes there is someone else offering to pay them, at which point their alternative to a negotiated agreement is much higher, and therefore the negotiating position is much better. And therefore, the situation is they have to guess how much you'd be willing to pay, and then you have to decide whether to pay. One complication, of course, is that in general, there's no way for them to destroy the information credibly. They can't like assure you that they will never come back to you for more blackmail. And therefore, the amount you can collect based on that is lower than it would be if you could reliably have it be a one-shot. There's also the danger that the fact that you paid them blackmail is also, in fact, the subject of further blackmail on multiple levels. It's evidence of your guilt of something. It's evidence of your willingness to pay. It's evidence of your general susceptibility to blackmail in general. It's evidence of your wealth. It's evidence of your vulnerability. It's evidence of lack of power, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So on many levels, you're reluctant to pay. But basically what's going on is they're trying to guess how much you'd be willing to pay and then ask for an amount such that their returns are maximized. And keeping in mind like the cost of failure, right? The cost of failure might be that you try to hurt them, you might even try to kill them, try to defame them, they might have to go, et cetera, et cetera. So get them arrested. So they will choose a number. If blackmail is legal, then potentially there are no consequences to failure on their behalf. And they are probably incentivized to ask for an amount of money you probably don't have and probably would be unwilling to pay. because if you ask for $1 million instead of $10,000 and you succeed 3% of the time, you're way ahead of the game. So the same way that most people don't ask for enough money in most negotiations, chances are the correct answer in a legal blackmail scheme would be to ask for an amount of money you probably can't pay in many situations, or more money than they could ever use in their lives, right? If you're trying to blackmail Jeff Bezos, you ask for $50 million or something. Because why would you ask for 5? He's not that much less likely to pay you 50. And then you see what happens, and often you overshoot, and you face the consequences. Whereas if it's illegal, you want to be much more careful, and therefore your position is much worse, and you ask for a lot less money. Is my guess, and it's much less lucrative. That's all speculation. Maybe Robin has a different point of view.
I basically agree with Zvi. It's not a very competitive market, but I don't think that's terribly important. Most legal cases where A sues B, it's not a competitive market. It's more of a bilateral monopoly. Although in the case of blackmail, as he indicated, you don't want to pay all at once. You need to pay over time. And there's always the possibility that somebody else could find out this information, in which case now there's 2 of them trying to sell the information, and then they'll each have to take a cut, or it'll have to be revealed. But I wouldn't be counting on any particular competitiveness. The main point I would make is that when you're relying on law to enforce things, it's just generally very expensive for legal officials to find out things about ordinary people. When the people around you have a financial incentive to find out and enforce rules, the cost of enforcement goes way down because they get this information in the process of doing other things. And so arguably, blackmail-based enforcement is just much cheaper at discouraging people who do things than formal criminal law or other sorts of legal responses.
Cool, thanks. I think I have one question, and then maybe Jacob tells me unless I have something, some sort of question in the chat. But I guess I'd be interested, Robin, to make this whole sort of deal more palatable to me. Can you just name a few concrete good things, like fairly concrete good things you think will happen as a result of like legalizing blackmail that you're just like pretty excited about happening in society?
The best movie of the year that I've seen is called The Assistant. It's about a sexual harassment case. And I think those cases would go better if blackmail were illegal. In the story of the movie, the woman actually can't do very much and doesn't do very much, unfortunately, but blackmail would allow a better option. I think in the case of, say, David Letterman, who famously was blackmailed for having affairs, if he could have actually been blackmailed, then people like Letterman would be doing much less of what he was doing. And, these weren't just affairs with random people who liked him. I mean, these were employees of him. And so, they are much more morally questionable. And so I think there would just be a lot less sexual harassment if blackmail was legal.
Okay.
That's a big category that might matter to you.
Okay. All right. That makes sense.
So interestingly, I read the, I haven't seen The Assistant, but I did, in preparation for this debate, because I knew Robin talked about it, looked on Wikipedia to find the plot summary. I mean, spoilers, but it can't be helped. And based on the plot summary in Wikipedia, I actually disagree that it would have helped in that particular case. I think
it wouldn't hurt. It wouldn't hurt. It wouldn't make it worse. It might help. It might not.
I think it would have had no effect. I think that she, in fact, attempted to share the information as best she could, was told that nobody cared.
She was discouraged but if she had monetary incentive, she might well have pursued it further. She could have got money out of it.
When faced with the threat that someone might learn about it, he instead yelled at her. He got mad at her and threatened her.
Because he had the power and she didn't have a credible threat. If she had the credible threat of blackmail, then she could have.
Wait, blackmail isn't a credible threat. The credible threat is to share the information, which she absolutely has a credible threat. She actually tried to share the information.
She tried to share it with her HR department. She didn't go to the press. She didn't think she'd get much benefit by going to the press.
So how does her failing to have blackmailed her boss change that? She would go to the press and it would work?
She would threaten to go to the press.
Why didn't she do that anyway?
She didn't. She would correctly anticipate that going to the press, she wouldn't actually get her that much. But so by blackmail, she'd get a lot more.
And my anticipation is her boss would have said, well, actually, I'm going to blackmail you because if you do this, I'm going to tell every person who calls for reference, every person who ever asks about you, including who didn't ask, that you're a terrible person to hire because you cause trouble.
Right. He already had that threat. We're just adding another on her side. We're not without anything on his side. So we're moving the negotiation thing. So that's a concrete example.
Right. I'm saying I actually think that the blackmail would actually shift power in his direction, not hers. No.
So there are a lot of powerful people who break a lot of rules, actually legal rules in many ways, and then the people around them shut up about it, let them get away with it because they don't feel they actually have a credible threat to report it, and so they don't. And so blackmail would mean a lot more actual reporting or a discouragement of the things powerful people do that break rules and norms.
Jacob tells me that a guy called Even Lautley also has a question. Even if you're interested in that, that's good. But I think first, probably Alyssa, if you had a question, I'd be interested to hear that. Either of you are welcome to turn up your microphone.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you great.
Cool. So there are many questions I could ask, but a pretty simple one. In general, do you think selling people's addresses should be illegal? Currently, I think it is legal. There are several companies that do it, but like, it seems like it would be a relatively straightforward thing to ban, since like, you know, it's a relatively clear dividing line, and they're mostly like a few businesses which are engaged in it, and like most businesses are not. And then like it seems to like mostly harm people. Like the benefit to me of like being able to like find out where any random stranger lives without their consent seems like I don't seem to get benefit from this. And then like the idea that anyone could find out where I live without my consent seems like it could potentially be dangerous, which is why, as far as I can, I've removed my address from all those sites.
I'm with Alyssa. I find it hard to think of the benefits of letting people find random people's addresses, and I can see a lot of harm. So yeah, I mean, I'm open to counter arguments, but it seems pretty obvious to me. Sure.
Yeah, I think that there's an argument to be made that you want to let people send you physical mail, but like, I don't see any reason you have to know their address to do that. The post office can know your address. So yeah, I would support making that an opt-in. You have to verify that people should be able to get your address, and you should probably get a cut of the money.
I feel like currently we're in a situation where some people would like to be able to find others' addresses, and there's not currently a market for that. There's not a very good like market for that sort of thing. And if we legalize blackmail, this sort of market would get a boost. This would be more likely to form.
There were these things called phone books back in the day. I don't know if you guys remember these landline things that had wires into the walls, but there were these big pieces of paper that went with that listed names and addresses, and that had basically the name address mapping for everybody in your area. So that was a market for those things, and that was a common thing.
Interesting. I think that did. Was that for everyone in your area, or was that for like country?
Everybody in the entire city, sure.
No, like what happened, once a year they would drop off this gigantic yellow book at your doorstep, and it would say Manhattan on it. And it would like, you just look up everyone by name, and it would just say like, here's their telephone number, here's their address.
And libraries would have this for all the geographic areas. If you wanted to go find a telephone book for some of the area, just go to the right library and look in the book.
Okay. That seems like it would get worse.
I feel so old right now.
I remember telephone books. I've seen them around. I used to. Okay. Yeah, I am interested. Did Even, the guy called Even Lautley want to ask a question? You're welcome to. Other people around who I can see who I'd be happy to ask questions include Daniel Fallon, David Friedman. Oh, Even.
Yeah, I've got a quick question. So my kind of view on this is like, what happens in a couple of years or 10, 20 years when everyone's just a little bit more used to kind of having their privacy opened up, and there's less expectation of privacy. And for example, like, I don't know, some database gets hacked, and with future level search tools, it really wouldn't be that hard for me to believe that you could just kind of like look up a bunch of names and kind of pull a search query, like a bunch of people that have looked up some like edgy porn, and then like their names and addresses, and then you just send out a mass email. Like, how do you guys kind of see blackmail in the future when there's just so much more information about people in general? Thanks.
Like I said before, I'm happy to have lots more privacy rules or rules about what you're allowed to gossip about. I think there's a big debate to have about what sort of information we want to prohibit people from sharing about other people. That's separate from whether you have these extra blackmail rules, in my mind. I don't see the extra blackmail rules doing that much, but I'm happy to see a lot of potential new privacy rules.
Yeah, so
Go for it.
I'm a big fan of free speech and letting people say what they want and talk about things when they want to. And I'd be loath to say that you couldn't share information, but you know, certainly if you hacked into a database and stole someone's information and shared it, like that seems like an area where it'd be reasonable to have a law despite that. And certainly I think that like the public does not have a right to know what kind of porn people are looking at. That is not more important than people's needs for privacy. as a concrete example, I would think that would do no harm.
What do you think on the current margin, Robin, that just changing the blackmail laws and not adding a bunch of important privacy laws would on net damage a lot, enhance a lot of the problems of current lacking privacy laws?
No.
All right, asked and answered. Natalia Mendonca, would you like to turn on your audio and optionally visual and ask a question?
Yes, so I have a question for Professor Robin Hanson. So Zvi has mentioned that one difference between blackmail and gossip is that with blackmail, people are incentivized to induce others to violate norms so that they have information to blackmail others. And because of that, it's not clear to me that making blackmail legal would reduce in a net reduction in norm violation or a net increase in it.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, Robin.
I would say the world of gossip is a scarier and more dangerous place than you might realize. Setting aside blackmail, people around you who gossip about you are often trying to make you look bad and trying to entice you into doing things that then they can gossip about and make you look bad. That happens in corporations, it happens in social groups, it happens in politics, world, because people already want to gossip about each other, and especially like negative gossip. They are especially looking for any sort of negative thing they can say, and they will often try to induce it if they can. And that even happens, say, in current cancel culture problems. Often the things people get canceled for are things that other people induced them to say. It's like some guy made the OK sign because somebody else was making it, and he's, and asked him to make it, so he made the OK sign, and he got videoed and then fired for making an OK sign, but not because he ever knew what the symbol meant. He was just doing what somebody else wanted him to do. So that sort of thing happens today all through gossip. It's one of the costs of gossip. I don't see blackmail substantially adding to the trade-off there.
Oh, cheers. Other people...
Zvi may have an opinion.
I mean, I think it absolutely changes the trade-off. I think it's about order. I think it's about magnitudes and like which things are the more common use cases. But absolutely, like you're incentivizing strongly something, you're going to see more of it relative to other things. What would you expect?
Cool, that makes sense. I think we'll probably wrap up soon. I think other people I'd be down to ask questions includes like Ray Arnold, Rob Miles, Ruby Bloom, a few other people there. But yeah, I think we'll probably wrap up shortly. Also, if Ollie or Jacob wanted to add in any other questions that they had. All right. Yeah, no, Zvi, how do you feel about blackmail? We've had a conversation.
I'm against it, Ben. I'm against it.
But I think even Zvi will agree that most people, when they give an argument about blackmail, don't give a very good argument. So it's still an example of the sort of thing people have an intuition should be wrong. And then when they give arguments, they sort of make up a bunch of vague stuff that doesn't actually make much sense.
I think most people end up doing a mix of a lot of stuff that makes no sense and like weak versions of like arguments that would make sense if they thought them through more carefully and stated them better, but mostly state them very badly. Good way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an interesting, distinct feature about this policy area and many other policy areas where people just aren't able to articulate why.
Robin, can you think of it in a policy area where people actually give good arguments?
Well, when people say we need to have taxes or the government won't have any revenue, I think that works.
But there are arguments about how much to tax people or how much revenue the government is very bad.
Well, I think they say the rich people have more money, so we should tax them because that's where the money is. And that does work.
I mean, it's less bad, but they're less wrong, but yeah.
I'll take that. All right, okay, cool. I think I'm interested in any closing statements either of you want to add. And then I guess we might, I should add the feedback form. I'll definitely give everyone the feedback form after those closing statements. But yeah, otherwise I would be, I might leave this conversation open if either of you want to stick around or chat more, or if people in the conversation want to actually have some audio conversation. I know I've got to run and do a few other things.
I regret not doing a before and after poll here.
Yeah. No.
Interesting to too.
I think I trust this crowd to actually remember what they thought before. If we wanted to do a poll now, I think they would like. If we could do it, you could even do a Twitter poll of just like support before, support after, oppose before, before after. Yeah.
I don't have a Twitter, but Jacob, if you're listening, you can change the feedback forms. Just include what was your position before and what was your position and like what was your position afterwards, or which way you went. All right, you're saying yes. Okay, you'll do that. Cool. Zvi and Robin, do you want to make any final statements about your positions or important points you wanted to address? I would be interested in both of you saying any other thoughts you have, and then we'll do the feedback form. I mean, Jacob's got that ready. Zvi, do you have any thoughts?
I mean, I have many more things I could say. I think that we've reached a natural conclusion, but I will stick around and people want to keep talking. So let's put it that way.
That seems great. Robin, any other things you'd like to add?
I guess I just want to summarize, which I think Zvi will agree with, which is just to say we can come down to sort of this category of certain cases and other cases. And his claim is that this extra set of other cases are different from the first set of cases. And I don't think he's really offered much direct argument that it is much better. He's made the claim, and sort of often policy comes down to this. In the end, there's just some parameter that one parameter went one way, it would be one side would be right, parameter went the other side would be right. They take all of their time discussing just getting clear what the parameter is, but in the end, you can't resolve it because you don't know the parameter value.
Yeah, I would say I can offer what my models are for like the mechanisms I believe are operating and how often I think various things are harmful versus helpful, and I can go into much detail, and I could write that up and we could talk about it. But in terms of what Robin would like would be an actual study about the harms and benefits as such. I can't think of how one would go about that study to find the conclusion.